Hello.
Hi, Priscilla. And it's Howe, right? I want to make
Yes.
sure I pronounce it right.
Yep. Thank you for asking. People often give it all kinds of different pronunciations.
Hey, I got the same problem.
Oh, yes.
I've at this point in my life, it's close enough.
Uh-huh.
Hello, ladies.
Hello. I'm glad to see you made it in there. You kind of came in and dropped.
No, I was actually in super early, but once I saw you, I had problems with my audio, so we're off now. So Priscilla, so great to see you. I see are we recording right now?
Oh, it is recording. Do you want me to stop it?
Yeah, maybe just for a little bit. Yeah.
Now it's recording. Do you want me to start the intro or wait? There we go.
People signing in.
Mm-hmm. We're going to record.
Hey. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. We have some more coming in. We'll get started in a second here.
Oh, there are up to 50 people. Whoa.
All right. Well, let's get started here tonight. I want to welcome everyone to Get Set Up special event, Storytelling for Grandparents with Priscilla Howe. My name is Donna, and I'm a guide at Get Set Up, and I'll be your host today. As a community of active, older adults, we are looking to learn new skills. Get Set Up is thrilled to have Priscilla with us today to help us think about storytelling and connecting with our family members. Before we get started, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. For those tuning in live with our Get Set Up Zoom class, please remember to mute yourself during the heart of the event, but do keep your cameras on if you're comfortable so we can enjoy connecting with each other and so that we can capture some images to share in the future. If you have a question for Priscilla while she's presenting, please let us know in chat and we'll do our best to call them to Priscilla's attention in real time. We'll also leave time to take questions for Priscilla after her interactive workshop before the end of our hour together. For those joining via our community live stream on Get Setup TV, Facebook, or YouTube. You're welcome to enter your questions into the comments. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions. And now on to our special guest. Storyteller Priscilla Howe travels the world, 14 countries so far, with a bag full of puppets and a head full of stories. Since 1993, her full-time job has been telling folk tales, personal stories, and literary tales. She performs on Zoom, and when it isn't a pandemic, in schools, libraries, festivals, house concerts, and literally in her own backyard in Lawrence, Kansas. She's currently offering a Zoom story time every weekday, and she has a subscription service to bedtime stories for kids on Patreon. You can find out more on her website at priscillahowe.com. Priscilla, welcome to Get Set Up. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so glad to be here. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I got to do what I'm doing, and then sort of dive into some of the kinds of stories that you can tell, some of the ways to tell stories, some story games. My goal always in giving workshops and talks is I have two goals. The first one is to give you some tools that you can take away and use right away. And the second one is to have fun. So there we are. That's the big plan. So I am a professional storyteller. I've been a storyteller. Well, I've been a storyteller all my life. Aren't we all? When I was a kid, I told stories when I babysat, but I didn't call myself a storyteller until 1988. In 1988, I got a new job as a children's librarian. I'd been a university librarian for a couple of years, but I knew that wasn't for me. So I got this job as a children's librarian, and some of my colleagues said, "Hey, we're going to a school to tell stories. You want to come?" I said, "Sure." They said, "You want to tell a story?" I said, "Okay." So one of my colleagues said, "Here's a book with some stories you might like in it. Try one of these." So I took this book and I flipped through and I found a story called The Crooked Little Finger. This collection was by Philippa Pierce. And check this out. I have crooked little fingers. I thought, I have to tell that story. So I went to the school, I told that story, and the kids liked it and they clapped. I thought, whoa, this was fun. I wanted to learn everything I possibly could about storytelling. So that's what I did. I jumped in and I spent 5 years as a children's librarian. Really, I've treated it like an apprenticeship. I mean, I did all my regular work, but I also would go to any schools or Head Starts or wherever I could to tell stories. I also learned to tell stories to adults. So that's how I came. Then in 1993, I quit my job in Middletown, Connecticut, and moved 1,400 miles to Lawrence, Kansas, because I knew I could afford to live here and be a full-time storyteller. So that's what I've done ever since. This is what I do. And I love talking to people about telling our own stories. There are lots of kinds of stories you can tell. You can do personal stories, you can do folk tales, you can do stories from books, and I'll touch on all of those. One of the things that I love about storytelling is, the main thing that I love about storytelling is it's about connection. When I'm telling a story, I'm connecting with the story and I'm connecting with the listeners. And the listeners are connecting among themselves and connecting with me and connecting with the story. It's all this whole great ball of connection. And the listeners also then have a shared history. So then they can talk about that story later. I'm not a parent or a grandparent. So I feel a little bit like a fraud doing this workshop where I'm not a grandparent, but I do know stories and I do know kids. And I'm a pretty good grade aunt. I So personal stories. Sometimes I like to start out a workshop just by asking if anybody has a scar. And I can't actually see you. Some of you are on Facebook and some of you are on YouTube. I can't see you, but I know that every one of you has a scar. And if you have a scar, you have a story. I'll just quick tell you my scar story. And if you have someone in the same room with you, you might later turn to them and tell them your scar story. I have a scar right here on my hand. 7th grade. 7th grade art class. We were making linoleum block prints. And Mr. Manahan, the teacher, said, do not hold the block in your hand and always dig away from yourself. Never dig toward yourself. That tool is very sharp. Well, you know how it is when you're in 7th grade. You know everything. You do, you know everything. So I knew that if I held the block in my hand and dug toward myself, I could get it kind of a better purchase on the linoleum block. And I was digging and it slipped. Of course, that tool slipped and it went right into my hand. But I was a good girl in 7th grade. And I didn't want to get in trouble. So I didn't tell anybody. I just got up, went to the sink, washed my hand, and held a paper towel on that puncture wound I just made in my hand. I didn't go to the nurse. And if I had gone to the nurse, I might not have the scar, but I also wouldn't have the story. One of the things I love about scar stories is that they illustrate a certain story structure that I really like. You start with a likable character and a setting. So art class, me, likable enough. And then you get to trouble coming. So when you're thinking about telling a story, trouble coming is really useful. It's not the trouble itself, it's the trouble coming. So you do some suggestions, some foreshadowing, then you get to the trouble. Then you fix the trouble. And sometimes there's insight at the end. So as you're thinking about stories that you might tell to your grandchildren, you might think about the structure of them and think about that leading up to and giving little hints about what's going to happen. I sometimes work with, say, 4th grade boys, and they just want to have explosions, right? Everything explodes. But I talk to them about how it's much more interesting if you light the fuse. And then you see that fuse making its way toward the explosion, toward what is going to explode. So that whole bit is a useful piece. So you want to think about leading up. I like that story structure. I like thinking about story structure. We have lots of different kinds of stories. I want to tell you about a book that I love called Telling Your Own Stories by Donald Davis. You're gonna get a follow-up email if you're in the GetSetup group here that gives you this name. But Donald Davis wrote a book called Telling Your Own Stories. It's a book of prompts. And so I'm going to give you a few, and you might write them down. You can use these as writing prompts. You can use them as storytelling prompts. And so you don't have to memorize anything with these. You just have to think about them a little bit. Here's one that I love. Tell about the oldest person you remember when you were a kid. Let me tell you a story that comes from this prompt. In the late 90s, I was working with a group of older women and listening to their stories and prompting them for some stories. And I asked this one, and a woman who at the time was probably in her 80s, probably late 80s, she said that she remembered her great grandmother. Now, I live in Lawrence, Kansas, which is near Missouri. And so that is actually important to this story. She told about her great grandmother, who was a sour old woman who smoked a lady's pipe. And she told one story. There was only one story this great grandmother told. And it was of being in the Civil War. At the time of the Civil War, she was a young wife. She had 2 children. She had a toddler and an infant, and her husband was away fighting in the war. And she heard the border ruffians coming. Now, at the time, Kansas and Missouri, there was a lot of friction with the pro and anti-slavery factions. So she heard the border ruffians coming. She quickly picked up the toddler and put him on her back, picked up the infant and held him in her arms. She ran to the neighbors, but she had to cross a creek. And so it was pretty deep. She was crossing this creek and the toddler fell off her back. She quickly put the infant on the bank, got back in the water, got the toddler out, rolled him on the bank to get the water out, and then picked up both children and ran to the neighbors to safety. So I heard this story in the 90s, the story of the Civil War. It was a personal link from the woman telling it to me. She'd heard it from her great grandmother. She told it to me, and now I've told it to you. And sometimes I tell it to children because I want them to hear that story. I want them to understand that piece of history. When we tell our stories, we are showing our values. We're showing what we love and what we don't. It is a great gift that we can give to our family members. One thing I would also encourage you to do is record your stories. I have a recording of my grandmother. My grandmother died in 1989. I have a recording of her. I have her voice. To have that voice is really, really special. So I would encourage that. Also, if it's easy for you, the StoryCorps has an app. I don't know if you ever listened to StoryCorps on NPR, but they have an app, and it's a way to collect the stories on their app. So we can tell our personal stories. Another prompt from that book is, did you ever have a problem with a piece of clothing or a haircut? From the people that I can see on this screen, I see some smiles. How many of you actually cut your own hair when you were little? So there are some great prompts in that book. Another one is, take us on a trip around your childhood neighborhood, or take us on a trip to your doctor when you were a child, and introduce us to your doctor. What was that like? My doctor used to give us lollipops. I don't know if they still do that. Do they give you lollipops? Seems funny. So think about those stories that you could tell from your own life. Think about telling the stories of when you got in trouble. One of the prompts from that book is, tell about a time your parents never found out about. I don't ask kids that question, high school kids, because they will tell you. They will definitely tell you, and sometimes you don't want to hear those stories. But that's a really wonderful prompt. Tell about a time your parents never found out about. So there are those kinds of stories. I tend to tell those to older kids. For younger kids, I don't tend to tell personal stories. I want to just give you a little quick idea of what works in terms of child development. So I'm going to shift away from personal stories into some other things, but with little tiny children, age 0 to 2, they love peekaboo, they love patty cake, nursery rhymes, finger plays, use lots of rhyme and rhythm. That's really useful for those age 0 to 2. When they're 2 to 3, still finger plays, rhyme and rhythm are great, but you can go a little bit longer. Simple stories still, 5 minutes or less. When they're done listening, they're done. Off they go. Sometimes they're done in the middle of a story. It's fine. Telling stories to children is a way also to get them to learn to be listeners. It's really a great thing for them. When they're 4 and 5, they're starting to differentiate from each other, from others, and they're starting to understand that other people have feelings in a way that they're understanding that they're separate. So rhythm, rhyme, repetition also very good, but you can go longer. Silliness, stories about families are really good with age 4 and 5. When they're 6 and 7, they're much more aware of emotions, and they are starting to understand morality. With these 6 and 7-year-olds, you can tell a story where somebody is doing something wrong, and they will say, he stole that. And it's a great way to, we were passing along what's important in our culture. They're also better at predicting where the story goes. These are great pre-reading skills. Telling stories is great for pre-reading because kids learn to predict. They learn to sequence. And then when they get to be older, 8 to 10, they're figuring out tricky stories. And they are very curious about other countries and about the natural world. And at that point, they understand irony and sarcasm. I don't use irony and sarcasm under age 7. It just is hurtful for the children. But those older kids are not as engaged by repetition. So you want to kind of dial the repetition back. They'll say, we already heard that. We already heard that. So those are just some things to think about as you're telling some stories to children. Just think about where they are developmentally. But I would recommend that you think about stories that you knew or you heard when you were young. Maybe you heard some of those urban legends, like the vanishing hitchhiker, or some of those stories that weren't really true. Or maybe in your community there was a ghost. You could tell the ghost stories of your community. Or you might think about games that you did as a child. I'm going to just do a quick one that I used to do with my brothers and sisters. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so my mother had a whole bunch of these things just to keep us quiet. This one is called A Dark and Stormy Night. It was a dark and stormy night. A band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, "Chief, tell us a story." Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. It was a dark and stormy night. A band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, "Chief, tell us a story." Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. It was a dark and stormy night. Band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. Length, one got up and said, "Yo, Chief, tell us a story." Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. Do you see where it's going, right? It's a circular story. So as a kid, I would do it with my brothers and sisters in a million different ways. We would pass the story back and forth. So we might do it angry. It was a dark and stormy night. A band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, "Chief, tell us a story." Chief got up, lit his pipe. He wasn't supposed to smoke, and began. Or we might do it like a baby. We are dark and stormy night, but the band of robbers was sitting around the campfire, and at length one guy said, "Chief, tell us a story." Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. Or maybe like a chicken. Moo, moo, moo. It was a dark and stormy night. Band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, "Chief, Chief, Chief, tell us a story. Chief got up with his pipe and began. Or a cow. Mm. It was a dark and stormy night. A band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, Chief, tell us a story. Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. So now I've done it, what, 6, 7 times? So you've heard it 6 or 7 times. So let's do it together. Ready? In a regular voice. It was a dark and stormy night. A band of robbers was sitting around the campfire. At length, one got up and said, Chief, tell us a story. Chief got up, lit his pipe, and began. What I learned as a kid is that if you do that story long enough, all the adults leave the room. We still do it in my family, and all the in-laws leave. So that's that sort of thing that maybe you remember some little jokes and some little rhythms or rhymes. Those are useful to do with your grandchildren. Going younger than that, although actually I did that with my 3-year-old great niece a few weeks ago, and she liked it, and she did it with me, and we did some different voices. But you might also think about, I don't know if you ever did had somebody dandle you on their knee. My father would take me on his knee, and he would do trot trot to Boston, trot trot to Lynn, watch out Priscilla, you might fall in, and he would drop me between his knees. So I'll do it again just so you can hear it. And there are different versions. Sometimes he would do trot trot to Boston to buy a bottle of gin. Trot trot to Boston, trot trot to Lynn, watch out Priscilla, you might fall in. So there are things like that, but there are also some finger plays that you might end up doing with, this is very good for little children. And so put your hand up, and we'll do this. I've been gardening. My hand really is clean, just doesn't look it. So this is Johnny Whoops or Willie Whoops. Johnny Whoops, Johnny, 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 Johnny Whoops, Johnny Whoops, Johnny, 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 Johnny. Or then you use the name of the child. So my great niece's name is Ludi. Ludi Whoops, Ludi, 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 Ludi Whoops, Ludi Whoops, Ludi, 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 Ludi. So whenever you get to this part, it's the whoops. And my other great niece is Harriet. Harry Whoops, Harry, 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 Harry Whoops, Harry Whoops, Harry, 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 Harry. So that's a fun one that you can just do in the car. You can just do it at bedtime, which does, let's see, it does lead me to, when do you do stories? Of course, bedtime. Of course, that's a great time to do stories. So you can tell kind of quiet, calming down stories. Some people do a serial story, right? So you start a story, and then then you get to a cliffhanger, but you're going to do the next part the next night. When I was a kid, at one point we had a boarder at our house, a college student who lived with us and helped take care of some of the younger kids, me, for example. And she would make up stories about a little girl named Paraphernalia. This was in the 60s. I thought that was a name. I thought that was a girl's name. For years, I thought that was a girl's name. Anyway, she'd tell me these stories about the adventures of Paraphernalia, who rode on a magic vacuum cleaner. And she would make up all kinds of things that Paraphernalia would do. And so you can do that as a serial story, or you can do discrete stories every single night. So a different story each night. You might think about folktales. The best place I say this as a librarian. The best place to find folktales, I believe, is in the library. Here's the number, the Dewey Decimal number, 398.2. That's where folktales and fairy tales are, including scary stories. So 398.2, there's a little chant. I don't know who wrote this, but here's how it goes. If you're looking for a story and you don't know what to do, just look in 398.2. If you're looking for a story and you don't know what to do, just look in 398.2. If you're looking for a story and you don't know what to do, just look in 398.2. So if you go to 398.2, you'll find all these collections of folktales. Daunting, right? What do? Just open them? Just dig around? Let me give you the one big rule in storytelling. Find a story you love. Find a story you love. There are some other suggestions, but that's the one big rule. Love or feel compelled to tell. And then, so let's say you found a story you really love and you'd like to tell it. Here's the very good news. You don't have to memorize it word for word. I don't have that good a memory. I don't memorize stories. I see them image by image. I read the story many times. I think about it. I try to imagine every piece of it. I try to imagine more than I would ever tell. I try to know everything about every character. I walk as I think about the story, and I get the rhythm of the story in my body, just thinking about that story, getting it into me. And I ask myself a few questions. What is this story about for me? It might not be what it's about for your grandchildren. They might get some totally different meaning from it. But think about what it means to you underneath it. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you what my storytelling coach, Doug Lippman, calls the most important thing is, the MIT. So I'll just tell you this one. This is just like a 4-minute story. I think I can squeeze this in here. This is the story that I am best known for. It's a folk tale. I learned it from another storyteller who learned it from another storyteller who learned it from another storyteller. You might tell it, but you might change it so that it really suits you. You're allowed to do that. You don't have to tell it exactly the way I do. It's called The Ghost with the One Black Eye. There was a baby sitting in her high chair at the table. She said, "I want my apple juice." Her big sister said, "I'll get you your apple juice." The apple juice was downstairs in the basement, in the cellar. The big sister went down the stairs. There are 10 steps in case you're counting. She got down to the bottom of the stairs. She started going across the room when she saw a ghost. "I am the ghost with the one black eye." And that big sister ran all the way up the stairs. She got to the kitchen. She said, "Mom, can somebody else get the apple juice for the baby, please?" Baby's big brother said, "Are you afraid of something down there?" "Chicken. I'll go down there. I'll check it out." Boom, 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 boom. He got down to the bottom of the stairs. He started going across the room when he saw a ghost. "I am the ghost with the one black eye." And that big brother ran all the way up the stairs. He got to the kitchen. He said, "Mom, I have to go do my homework right now. Because I have math, spelling, reading, and gym. I got gym homework." His mother said, "You have gym homework on a Saturday morning? There must be something scary downstairs. I'll go down." She got down to the bottom of the stairs. She started going across the room when she saw a ghost. "I am the ghost with the one black eye." And that mom ran all the way up the stairs. She got to the kitchen. The baby's dad was not there, but Uncle John had just stopped by. Hey, John, nice to see you this morning. Would you do me a favor? Would you go downstairs, get the apple juice for the baby? Because I have a lot to do today. See the project on the table, the dishes in the sink. Would you do that? Uncle John said, you afraid of something down there? I'll go down there. I'll check it out. Boom, 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 boom. He got down to the bottom of the stairs. He started going across the room when he saw a ghost. I am the ghost with the one black eye. And that uncle ran all the way up the stairs. He got to the kitchen. He said, baby, 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 would you like some orange juice? Grape juice, banana juice, papaya juice, guava juice, sock juice, pickle juice, milk. You know what? That apple juice downstairs, it's gone bad. Past its expiration date. There's been a recall. I'll go to the store. I'll get fresh apple juice. Okay, baby? And the baby said, I want my apple juice. She climbed out of her high chair, hitched up her diaper, and went down the stairs. Bye, 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 bye. She started going across the room when she saw a ghost. I am the ghost with the one black eye. And that baby said, oh yeah? You'll be the ghost with the two black eyes if you don't let me get my apple juice. And the ghost disappeared and it never ever came back. So what I love about that story, what it means to me, not what it means to the kids who listen, but just to me is it's about power. For me, that story is about the one who's usually the most powerless, the baby, has all the power in the story. And so I think about that when I'm thinking about a story. Also, I wonder, I can read some of the chat here. What did you notice about how I told that?
You animated it with your hands
Mm-hmm.
and your voice.
Mm-hmm. And the characterizations, when I'm live, I'm actually standing up. So you get a lot more of how the baby moves. That's right. I cued you to count the steps, sounds of the stairs with different characters. So each one is different. You can tell who is who in the story. Yep, good comments there. So when you're telling a story, you want it to be alive. And you want your grandchildren to respond to it. So think about telling funny stories. Think about telling stories that the repetition too. The repetition is so important in that story because the kids know to join in. And I tell that story to everybody. I tell it at universities. I tell it to preschoolers. I tell it to everybody. And it is a great way to laugh. If you can be with your grandchildren and laugh, remember what that does. What is it? Is it the endorphins that it brings up? Anyway, you breathe. When you're laughing like that, you breathe and you get more air in your lungs. It's good for you. All of it is good for you. I also often try to, when I'm working with young children, I try to cross the midline of the body. This is good for developing brains. If you move your hand so there's a midline and move one hand to the other side in whatever you're doing, that's a great way to help your grandchildren's brains grow nicely. So bedtime is a great time for stories. In the car, of course, at the doctor's office, campfires. That story is a campfire story. I have 4 stories about that same baby. They're those funny, scary stories that kids tell, just tell at camp. So if you ever went to camp, think about the songs you sang at camp. Maybe those songs have a whole story in them The Cat Came Back is one. Bill Grogan's Goat is another. Some of these stories, oh yes, good question. Can you find these stories on the internet? I have a YouTube channel and The Ghost of the One Black Eye is on it. So there's one place. Also, you can find a lot of them on my website. You can find tons and tons of stories on the internet, tons of folk tales. Places like The Moonlit Road is a website of ghost stories. I'm trying to think of some of the other sites that are really useful, and my mind immediately went blank, gone. Well, that's a good question. Is it important to not read the stories? I love reading books to kids as well. I would not say that storytelling is more important than reading, or that reading is more important than storytelling. They're complementary. But I do feel like when you're telling a story without the book, you don't have a barrier, right? The book is a little bit of a barrier in some ways. It can be, not necessarily. I am careful about ghost stories with kids. So I do funny, scary stories for young children. For older kids and adults, I do the scary stuff. But I know the children usually, or I know what age they are, and I can kind of gauge, oh, this one is too much for these kids. I was a very tender child, and was easily scared, and so I'm careful about that. So watch the children as you're telling the stories. That's one of the ways that we learn to be better storytellers, by watching and by connecting with the children at the same time. And oh yes, my website will be in the notes. I also have well, I'll get to this at the end. I have that Patreon with bedtime stories. How do I remember the stories that I use in the voices I use for each character? How do I remember? Well, I feel like I know them. They are in my brain. These are real characters. These are real people. And I think about, if I'm working on a story, I might peg that character, like the big brother. I think about how my big brothers sounded when I was a kid. You afraid of something down there? Huh. I'll go down there. I'll check it out. So I really think about what those characters are like. And sometimes I find a person in my own life to sort of hang that character on, hang that voice on, or borrow the voice. And I try to be consistent. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I mess it up. It's okay. Don't be hard on yourself as you're thinking about stories that you might tell. Just try it out. If that one doesn't work, try a different one. I have a friend, a storyteller in New Hampshire named Papa Joe, who says, if you want to be a storyteller, tell stories. If you want to be a better storyteller, tell more stories. I really think he's right about that. So just try it. Just see how it goes. Sometimes it isn't going to work. Sometimes it's the wrong timing. Sometimes it's the wrong story. Sometimes you're not in the right place. It's okay. You can try another time. Try another story. Try a joke. Try a little story that maybe something small that happened to you. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, how about a game? We still have a little bit of time here. I want to teach you a game. And we won't really be able to do it because there are a lot of you out there. But I have a game called Magic Box. And this is a really fun one to do with kids. And then I'm going to tell you a variation on it where you don't actually have to have the box. So I have this box. It looks like a book. I love that about it. And inside the box, I have lots of different objects. So the fun thing about doing this game is you could gather objects with your grandchildren to put in the magic box. Could be a bigger box, but these are going to be story starters. I'm just moving them around so that I can then show you by moving my webcam. And you can do a pass around story with magic box. So let's see, put that flamingo there. I'll just put one more out. Okay. So a pass around story is a story where one person starts. So I might start and say, once upon a time, there was a ladybug, and the ladybug was flying through the trees. And then I might pass the box to the next person who would choose another object. Oh, look, there's a bee. And so the next person would say, the ladybug was flying through the trees. The trees were in bloom, and there was a huge bee in one of the blossoms. The ladybug didn't see the bee. The bee said, "Hey, you just bumped into me. Cut it out." The ladybug said, "I'm so sorry." And the ladybug flew farther away, and it came to a little pond where there was a duck. So each person would tell the next part of the story using the objects in the box. A very fun game to play, and very fun to choose the things that go into your magic box. So another version of that game is what in my family we called mailbag. There's no reason to call it mailbag, but that's what we called it, where one person starts a story. This is usually what we did in the car, long car trips. And one person starts, and the next person, when they get to the end of a few lines, they say mailbag. It's just a cue word to have the next person take over. You could use your own word, whatever you feel like. Ravioli. And the next person takes over and continues the story. So those pass around stories are really fun to shorten the road. There's another version of that pass around story called Fortunately, Unfortunately. One person starts the story, then the next person does a few lines. The next person says, unfortunately, and tells a little bit. And then when they get to the end of their turn, the next person says, fortunately. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth. And that's a really fun one to do that is simple and really can pass quite a lot of time. I'm going to give at least one more. Let's see. A story game that you might enjoy. And you can do this. We can do this with the chat. I think I'm going to try to do it with the chat. I've never done it this way with a chat. That's the thing too, with storytelling and with this sort of game. Just try it. Doesn't work, nobody died. So this is called interrupting storyteller. So one person is the storyteller. I'll be the storyteller this time. And the listeners interrupt with one word. So the storyteller tells a familiar story. So I'll do the Three Little Pigs. And you can throw things into the chat that I need to incorporate into the story. Now you might need to let me do at least a line before I get to the next one, or I can just sort of gauge it by the chat. So I'll start. You can just interrupt me with another element that I have to incorporate. Once upon a time, there were 3 pigs who lived with their mother. And one morning they were having bacon and eggs. Bacon and eggs. That's what they were having for breakfast. Bacon. And their mother said, we need some chicken here. With this bacon and eggs, this is ridiculous. Well, so the 3 little pigs went out to find a chicken. Unfortunately, they did not find a chicken. They were going to the east. They were going toward the sunrise and on their way to the chicken coop, but they came to a huge shoe. Huge. And the oldest pig said, this is big enough for me to live in. And the second, now we're getting too many suggestions. Anyway, you get the idea of how to play this game. Gosh, monster. Inside the shoe, there was a giant monster. And the littlest pig said, oh, late for school, gotta go. Anyway, that's a fun, really fun game to play with kids, to get them sort of just thinking about stories and being a little tricky about stories. Let's see, I had some other thing that I have I really do have the attention span of an Irish setter. So I had about five ideas zip into my head and leave at about the same time. Do I have another game? That one is really fun to do. Let's see. So I do want to give you one more story, and this is one, and then we'll have time for some questions, I think. This is our 2-minute story, I think, and this is really useful for the younger children. I learned this from another storyteller also. This is called Mr. Wiggle and Mr. Waggle. This is Mr. Wiggle, and this is Mr. Waggle. They were best friends. Let's put them inside their houses. You can do this with me if you'd like to. So, one day, Mr. Wiggle woke up. He decided to visit his best friend, Mr. Waggle. So he opened the door to his house. Pop! He went outside. Pop! He shut the door. Pop! And he went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, till he got to Mr. Waggle's house. Knock, 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 knock. Mr. Waggle was asleep. Mr. Wiggle rang the doorbell. Bing bong, bing bong, bing bong. Still asleep. So Mr. Wiggle went all the way home. He went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, till he got to his own house. He opened the door. Pop! He went inside. Pop! He shut the door. Pop! And he went to sleep. The next day, Mr. Waggle woke up. He decided to visit his best friend, Mr. Wiggle. He opened the door to his house. Pop! He went outside. Pop! He shut the door. Pop! And he went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, till he got to Mr. Wiggle's house. Knock, 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 knock. Asleep. Mr. Waggle rang the doorbell. Bzz, bzz, bzz. Must be in Europe. Still asleep. Mr. Waggle went all the way home. He went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, till he got to his own house. He opened the door. Pop! He went inside. Pop! He shut the door. Pop! And he went to sleep. The next day, they both woke up. They decided to visit each other. They opened the doors to their houses. Pop! They went outside. Pop! They shut the doors. Pop! And they went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill. They met right in the middle. Hi, Mr. Waggle. How are you, Mr. Wiggle? I'm fine. Let's have a party. Let's have a picnic. They had a picnic in the park. They had, at this point, if you were all children, I would be saying, what did they have to eat? Yes, of course they had pizza. Yes, they had ice cream. Oh, yes, they did. They had lemonade. I do about 7 or 8 things. Then they went on the swings. Whee, 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 whee. They went down the slide. Whoop, whoop, whoop. They went down the curly slide. Whoa. They went on the seesaw. Boom. And they danced. That was fun. Let's do it again sometime. Okay, bye-bye, 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 bye-bye. They went down the hill and up the hill, down the hill and up the hill, till they got to their own houses. They opened the doors. Pop. They went inside. Pop. They shut the doors. Pop. And they went to sleep. And that's the story of Mr. Wiggle and Mr. Waggle. That is a useful story if you're somewhere where there is a crying child. If you're in the doctor's office, in the waiting room, it's really helpful. And even little tiny children, my 1-year-old great niece, I did it for her, and she was going pop, pop. Actually, she was doing it like this. Pop, pop. She kind of got it. So I wondered if you had questions. Oh, I will say the other thing, the thing that I was going to say before. which is that I have a subscription service to bedtime stories, audio only for kids on Patreon. You can find it on my website, the link to it on my website. Every week I upload a new story with a little gentle chat talk down to good night, sleep well. So you might have a look at that. It's a subscription service. So check that out. I also would love to hear if you have questions. And you can put them in the chat. I am a librarian to my core, so I like to give people information. I hope I didn't overload you with all of this stuff.
This was great, Priscilla. Very good.
Yes.
Anyone have any question? Go ahead.
Some good books to read, just that I could start with.
Oh gosh. Well, right now, from the library, I would suggest Mo Willems books. Those are very fun. I also some old favorites like Maurice Sendak. I don't know if you know of the Nutshell Library. It has Chicken Soup with Rice and Alligators All Around. Those are little tiny books by Maurice Sendak. Those are very fun. Whatever stories you might remember, like some old ones. What is that? The Carrot Seed is great. Picture books by Cynthia Ryland. Oh, Robert Munsch. Let me say, I love Robert Munsch. I tell lots of Robert Munsch stories, M-U-N-S-C-H. He gave me permission to tell his stories because I make my living at it. Not to record them, but to tell them. Robert Munsch has wonderful stories that are easy to tell, really easy to tell. You might look for those. They're very fun and funny and easy to learn. A question about technology. How has technology affected storytelling? Kids will still listen. They will still listen. I have a 95-minute story that I've told in juvenile detention, and kids will sit for the whole time. But still, we do have shorter attention spans to some extent. Sometimes kids forget that I'm not TV. That's right. Robert Munsch is a great Canadian. My grandmother was Canadian, and so I have strong Canadian roots. Have I told? Yes, I have told stories with seniors, and one thing that I love to do too is do some of those story prompts. Can I mention the? Oh darn. Amri Das, I can't quite see the end of it. Can you put that last part as just the question? I'm glad that you enjoyed it. What's the YouTube channel? It's under Priscilla Howe, Priscilla-Howe. And so if you look that up, you'll find my videos on there. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and although not very much on Twitter, but feel free to kind of stalk me. It's the wrong thing to say. That's not what I meant. Don't stalk me.
Priscilla, you've done a great job tonight. We're kind of getting to our end of our hour here, and we'd like to finish up with a group photo with Priscilla for our memory book. So people, if you're willing to take the group photo, just make sure your camera's on. And do we have our photographer here?
All right, everyone. I'm going to do this a couple times. Ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, I'm going to do it again. 1, 2, 3, smile, everyone. Don't be shy. You look great.
For that slightly manic look. Thanks everybody for coming. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you, Priscilla. It's been wonderful having you here today and learning about your storytelling. Now, to continue hearing stories from Priscilla yourselves or with your grandchildren, check out the bedtime stories on our website at priscillahowe.com. And thank you, our audience here in the front row class and on our live stream communities. If you'd like a recording of this event, please email our support team at help@getsetup.io. If you are new to Get Set Up, we hope you've gotten a taste for what we do. We have over 300 online classes weekly, all designed for older adults, taught by older adults. The classes are free as we work with local governments and community and Medicare organizations who support their members with free classes. I also want to draw attention to our creativity classes on Get Set Up. If you liked storytelling for grandparents tonight, one of our other classes might be good for you too. Look for the link to sign up for these classes in the chat here on Zoom, in our live streams, and at getsetup.org. And everyone who registered will receive an email after this event with follow-up links and notes, including links to our creativity classes and other exciting upcoming guest speakers. We look forward to seeing all of you in the future for classes. Again, thank you, Priscilla, for coming here tonight. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you very much.